welcome to our first program of the 23-24 year for the Attleboro Historic Preservation Society. Before we begin tonight, I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't mind standing and saluting the flag while we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we begin tonight, we have some exciting news from the Industrial Museum that Carlton is going to share, so I'm just going to step aside for a minute before we proceed with our program.
So folks, it's always a pleasure to have you here. I learned so much when we come in on a day like this, and I want to welcome you here and tell you that I am stepping down as director, and the new director, and who will be my boss, because I'm still going to do a little educational programming and things like that, speaker series, maybe some in-depth research, which I never had time to do when I was the real director because the roof leaked, but you know, all those things you know when you manage a house. So the new director is Victoria Antonucci. She officially starts on October 1st, right? But the board said, wouldn't it be nice if we kind of transitioned her so she knew, you know, where everything was and what to do? And I said, yeah, great, tell me when and where. So that's what we're doing. It does take a lot of fun out of it. Not really. No fun at all. So Victoria's here. If you call her at the museum, we're still open the same hours, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The email is the same. She'll get it because she's the director now. And, you know, and she'll pass that on to me too. So you know, you want to get in touch with me, just say, you know, that guy Carlton, you know, and we'll be great. I think I look forward to more days like this too. So have fun.
Thank you. Congratulations, Carlton.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Victoria.
I'm not going away.
I hope everybody got one of our programs. So I'm just going to quickly go over them. Most of our programs this year, we're going to be hosted here. We're going to be off the road 2 times, but all our other meetings are going to be here once monthly. So next month on October 19th, we're going to have Don Doucette reminiscing about going uptown, his move from farm life to his urban encounter just a few miles down the road uptown. On November 16th, Bob Lanfer, who's here also tonight, is going to talk about collecting postcards, and he's going to use his Attleboro collection to illustrate his postcard collection and collecting postcards. On December 14th, we'll again have our members' holiday dinner at Morin's Diner. And then if you flip it over and rotate it, January 2024, Marian Wrightington, who's here tonight, is going to present on Attleboro's Caprons. And then on February 15th, we'll be on the road and we're going to the Holy Family Coptic Orthodox Church. That's the old St. Joseph's Church on South Main Street. They just had their fair this weekend, so maybe you saw that. On March 21st, I'm going to present what I'm calling Patchwork. They're short Attleboro histories, things that didn't quite make a full program, so we'll just give you little snippets of histories throughout Attleboro. And then on April 18th, we're having the complement to last year's program on the Solemn League and Covenant. So we had Dr. Foreman presenting on how and why the document was written, and next year, we're going to have Rhett Butler, who's been researching Attleboro signers, present on the men from Attleboro that put their lives at risk by becoming traders and signing that document. On May 18th, we'll be on the road again. That's a Saturday, and a Saturday morning, and we're going to do a walking tour of a portion of Newport Avenue. And so parking for that is at the Sadler Factory and at Bethany Chapel. So that's what those 2 addresses are. And then in June, we're going to have a presentation from a performer, Lady J, who's going to talk about Deborah Sampson. Although not directly related to Attleboro, we have some of her Attleboro descendants who live among us today. And that is our 2023-2024 program calendar, so we hope to see you at multiple events. Tonight's event, Show and Tell, is something we've been doing now the last 3 or 4 years, where we kind of crowdsource and we ask you to bring in things. We also bring in some things, some of the new donations, and we show off and we hear stories from the people of Attleboro. And so we've got a unique setup tonight. So we have the microphone. If you come around, if you could cut through that direction, we've got a cord over here. If you don't want to come up to the microphone, if you could just stand up here, maybe we can catch you. This is a document camera right in front here. And so there's a taped square there. If your items fit there, then it'll project onto the screen. If they're larger and you want to hold them up or unveil them, you're welcome to just stand in front and show. I'm going to cheat since I'm already up here, and I'm going to start the program. I'm going to show you a couple of little treasures. I am a thrift shopper, and so Murray Church has a thrift shop, and so I was walking through the Murray Church thrift shop, and I found not a really old treasure, but from Attleboro's 300th anniversary in 1994, there was a paperweight from it, and it was 50 cents, and so I scored my own little treasure and little piece of Attleboro. We think maybe it came from one of the Attleboro factories here in town. Carlton?
I think Clearfloat.
Clearfloat likely made them right here in town. Mary? Yes?
Could you tell us what the coin actually says, or the medal,
It
or the
is.
medallion?
It has the Attleboro seal on it, and I don't know. Can you see it if I leave it that far down? Okay.
Oh, very nice.
So that's Wamsuta's signature. So Thomas Willett purchased the land for the North Purchase, the Rehoboth North Purchase from Willett. Willett purchased it from Wamsuta, I'm sorry, and those are his initials. The AXA is the Greek for Alexander, his European name. So that's the image that's on there. The lion and shield is the Attleboro symbol. I can't see it from here. Pick it up. All right.
You're among friends.
All right. And it has the chain representing the industry of Attleboro. And then the lion and the shield, is that from old Attleboro's? Now I'm failing as a historian. I think that's from Attleboro, England's
Right, yes.
coat of arms. And then on the reverse side, it's got the logo for the 300th anniversary of the city. So 1694 to 1994. Yes?
I marched in that parade.
Excellent. I'm gonna put these out, and I don't know. These are real photo postcards. My language I'm learning from Bob. How are those? And these came from a donation from Kathy Cohen. Her family, you might recognize both sides of her family names in Attleboro. They go back quite a few generations. Her great-grandfather was Terrence Flanagan. He was chief of police in Attleboro back in the 19-teens and 1930s, and the Flanagan name is an old one. And then her grandmother married a LaCroix, and both families lived down off of South Main around the Dodgeville area. And so these pictures are unidentified and undated. So, Bob, what do you think? Before 1907?
After 1907.
After 1907.
Because you can put both the message and the address. Before 1907, you can only put the address.
All right. So after 1907, but they're boxing photos or some type of health club, sports club, and I just didn't know if anybody knew anything about it. I was trying to look for boxing clubs in the area. I've come up empty so far. So I'm guessing maybe 19-teens?
Is that what you're
Something
saying?
at the YMCA.
The YMCA? Let's see. This guy you can see right here for sure has a boxing glove. These guys look like they're holding is it a punching bag? Oh, like that you would do that thingy with? Oh, I was thinking it was like the kettlebells of the days of yore. All right. Anybody recognize them? I'm going to check with the Y. I'm going to look through their 150th booklet, but I just didn't know if that was something people recognized. And so Kathy sent us a lot of ephemera from her parents. There was an Atherton's where you could purchase furniture on layaway, and so it's the layaway card. I'll show that later. I didn't want to monopolize everything. And so any information, if people recognize them, I made photocopies so we could write on them. And those were my treasures to share with you tonight. So I am going to pass the microphone.
I'm an oldie, and I've been here forever for the Historic Society. And once upon a time, for those of you who are members, you probably recognize the name of Evelyn Silver. Evelyn Silver did so much for us, but I'm just going to read what it says. Our mission was to move into the East Attleboro Academy, which is on Sanford Street. That was over 20 years ago. Built in 1842, East Attleboro Academy on Sanford Street is one of the oldest buildings in Attleboro, and probably the oldest that the city owns and continues to own it. However, we were, well, over 20 years, we did a lot of work, and it was a group of dedicated volunteers chaired by Evelyn Silver, and it was our mission to get that building up and running, and so that we could move in, and that's where our Historic Preservation Society meetings would be held, and we would have school programs. Evelyn was a principal in Attleboro, and I'm one of the teachers that I worked under her at Hill Robert School. But that had nothing to do with it. Evelyn's mission was to establish that building by the Attleboro Historic Preservation Society. And at one time, John Lepper was a representative, and he came forth and spoke with Evelyn, and he said, okay, let's see what we can do. First, it needs a new roof, it needs this, it needs that. So he appealed to the city and whatever, so we did. John represented us, and we did get funds, and we put on a new roof, and we went into the building and decided that the main floor of the building would be preserved and renovated so that we could have a meeting place, and that we would be able to have exhibits and school, as I said, school programs and whatever. But we have been working on that for over 20 years. And we've had programs, we've had volunteers that have come in to help us, and donations, and membership have come and supported our mission. But nothing's happened. Now, as of late, the new mayor, Brian, where is Brian French? He's hiding here someplace. There, he's in the back. He met with the mayor, and we had to, the former mayor, well, going back to Kevin Dumas, those of you might remember him, he supported us wholeheartedly, and he was hoping that we would finally, it would be resolved and we would be able to go in. There was a lot of work to be done. Dick Potter, who was a member of our society, worked. He was a contractor and did a lot of work in there. Gary Demers, who's here, he can say that he was downstairs in the building and upstairs, everywhere. And at one point, my husband was going by the academy, and he stopped in to check on something because he could see a bunch of squirrels on the rooftop, but they had come in to visit. And he said, no, you can't have this place. We are going to have it. So anyway, but lots of articles and everything. And the headlines in this newspaper, the Sun Chronicle, said, in Attleboro, an old but treasured building gets a new lease on life. Well, that new lease on life has not occurred yet, and we're still working on that. And our new mayor, Kathleen DeSimone, is, as I said, I've talked with her. Brian has met with her, and it's in committee. That was the last we heard. And that it would be submitted by bidding. And when I talked with her, I said, there's no bidding. It was supposed to be ours. We paid $1 a month.
A year.
A year, $1, right. And that was the promise that we were going to be awarded the building. And after all the work that we were doing initially. But it's still, and as I go by it, when I'm at the Y and I drive in, I just say, okay, it's time. I hear Evelyn. She's rumbling and she's shouting and she says, and she had a few other words, stronger words. So I called Janice back today and I said to her, do you have any pictures of Evelyn? I had some, but I couldn't find them. I said, because we need to honor her. We were hoping that she would be able to come here, but Evelyn has since passed. But when I walk at St. John's Cemetery and go past her plot, her cemetery monument, I'd say, Evelyn, we're still working on it. And doggone it, we're gonna get it sooner than later. Yes.
I was wondering if the Sanford Academy has a goal of how much money do you need to really put it in order for your holding your meeting, your central place? And also, does that have parking? Does it have it in the Y?
Well, we always park, there's a few spaces there on the hill, but we always were allowed to park in the YMCA parking lot. Right.
I just want to say that the city of Attleboro did get a grant for being a gateway city, did it not?
Yes, it did.
And they have a new officer in the town hall.
Right.
It does a public calendar. Why, that should be a goal, having in the academy. That's a gem.
It certainly is. We know that. When I mention Evelyn's name and when I drive by the academy, I would say, doggone it, it's about time. Let's go. And I did express my wishes with the new mayor, and she wasn't familiar with a lot of the history, and I'm sure that she's heard much from other people. So, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Blake Reynolds. So I own the Tudor House across the street from Capron Park. We call it the French Manor in honor of Algero French, who was the original owner. So I brought today, and I'm also on the Historical Commission with Marion and Rachel, Brian, Betty. And so I brought today a couple of things. So one is we've been very fortunate that the original blueprints for the home have been kind of passed down from owner to owner. So we have, I want to say, every blueprint but one. And so the one that I brought is the view of the back side of the house. Of course, the one I think is missing is the front of the house, but one of the greedy past owners, I'm sure, took it with them. So I brought the blueprint for the rear of the house, which is, I think it's from 1910 or 1911. The blueprints were created over a period from 1910 to 1911, and then the ground was broken on the house in 1911 and completed, we think, around 1913. Rachel did a phenomenal amount of research on it, and based on census records and things like that, we think that it was completed around 1913. So I brought that, and then what else I brought is that I was doing some cleaning behind, so in the basement, in what was the old laundry room, we have a 3-bay soapstone sink that's original, and for the different stages of the laundry. And so behind that sink was never cleaned out. It was just debris from the foundation, just kind of accumulated. So me being kind of my OCD self, I wanted to get rid of it and clean it out. And so under all of that debris was this fork. And so I found this fork buried in the debris, and imprinted on the back of it was Fairfield, Fairfield 1 design, and so by the Fairfield Plate Company, which is out of both the US and Canada, I guess. And so it's a dinner fork, and based on my research, this was created around 1913. So we figure that maybe the owners received it as a gift for when the house was completed, as a housewarming gift or something like that, but we can only suspect what, you know, it might have been from, but we think that it's probably an original kind of relic of the house. So it's kind of the one thing that we have in addition to the blueprints from that time period. So we can pass it around if you want, but
I know the glare isn't doing it.
yeah, I know.
You don't mind if you pass
No,
it around?
but so those are a couple of items that I've brought, and haven't come across anything else yet, but maybe at some point, well, more things will make themselves known as we do more updates.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Back in the 70s, when I moved into my old house, I loved my old house, but there was only one thing wrong with it. There was no washing machine. So every week, I'd take my dirty laundry and I'd go over to my mother and father's in Mansfield and do my wash. One day, I drove in the yard and there was a mason out there working on the patio doing some cement work or something. So I just walked by him and said hi and got in the house. And this was sitting on the kitchen table. And I said, "What's that?" And my father said, "Oh, it was down cellar," he said. It says Johnson on it. And he says, "That guy out there doing that work, his name's Johnson, so I thought I'd ask him if he wanted it." And I'm like, wait a minute, I just bought an antique house. I think that would look great in an antique house. And he said, "Oh, take it, take it, take it." He just hadn't been thinking. So anyway, so I took it home and I hung it on the wall, and it hung there for a couple of years, and I actually even changed the wallpaper behind it eventually, because I thought this made it really stand out nice and look pretty. So that's a piece of the wallpaper that's there now. And so then the North Attleboro Preservation Society was having one of those nights where you can have things appraised. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to take the sampler. So I took it down off the wall and tried to get all the dust out of it and all the cracks and everything. And on the back of it, between where the backing is and the frame was, I could see some color. And so I thought, what is that? What is in there? So I took it apart. And lo and behold, the lady who had done the sampler had cut up an Abraham Lincoln lithograph to back the sampler. And so I thought, oh wow, I guess I'll take this too. So I took both things to the appraisal. It was Milton Babcock, if you've ever heard of him. The old people probably know he was like the foremost appraiser that was around. So anyway, so I took it and he said, well, that picture has been cut, so it's not worth anything. And then he said this was worth about $125. This is a lot of genealogy with Johnsons and stuff like that. And so anyway, so I didn't really care how much it was worth because I had it, you know. So anyway, 10 years later, I had started doing woven chair seats for antique dealers. I did it for about 4 or 5 dealers. And they used to come to the house and drop off a chair and then come back and pick it up when I had the seat done. So one of those times, one of the lady antique dealers, she saw the sampler hanging on the wall. And she said, "That is beautiful." She said, "That is real silk thread on homespun linen." And she said, "It's worth about $300. So I thought, oh, wow. So it doesn't really matter how much it's worth now because I'm not going to sell it, because it was just a few years after that I did a little bit more genealogy. And then I realized that my great-great-grandmother is this one right here. And she had made it before 1869 because she died in 1869. Yeah, that's my story. And my father should be forgiven for giving it away, but he didn't give it away, but he tried to, because of the fact that he was not born until 1900 and she died in 1869. So it would have been his great-grandmother and, you know, he wouldn't have known her. So anyway, that's it.
So it's a postcard. We all probably remember the Solomon Sanitarium that became the Attleboro Sanitarium, then became a number of other things before it finally became La Salette, and then the castle at La Salette. This is another sanitarium that was run by, it was called the Attleboro Home Sanitarium, run by Dr. Laura Dustin Mackey. And she also had an operation or another building that she used during the summertime on Martha's Vineyard in Cottage City. I don't know if anybody knows the story of this woman and whether she was the first woman doctor in the area, or I didn't know whether maybe this is something that Rachel would want us to do some research in.
I know about her. She was a suffragette, I know that, because she was part of the Attleboro Women's League of Suffragettes.
Okay.
And when I saw her name, doctor, she was a doctor before she was married.
Okay.
And then Guston Street is off of Pleasant Street. I'm trying to think of what.
So she was an Attleboro native before she got married.
Yeah. But I don't know much about the kind of doctor that she was, so I'll put her on my list.
What was her name?
Guston,
How do you spell it?
Gustin.
And Mackey was her married name, Mackie. And the postcard is pre-1907, so I know that she was here in Attleboro before then. And she must have had a good practice if she also had a place on Martha's Vineyard, and it wasn't a small place, it was a good-sized building, so.
In that sanitarium, there was a place
So
here
this-
and in.
Right, so this is her Attleboro practice, which was probably in her house, I assume. And then this is the one on Martha's Vineyard in Cottage City.
So is the Attleboro House still standing?
I don't know. Can you see enough of it from what's up there?
So you don't know where it was located?
I don't think it says. There's no address on here.
Are there any years?
It's,
Year reference?
well, this is before 1907, but I don't know how much before. Excuse me?
Did you try Googling it?
No, I knew what the subject was tonight, so I said, let me look through and see what I can bring that somebody might be able to inform us on.
My name is Andrea Guyett Twombly, and I, along with my sister and my brother, were the fourth generation owners of Guyett Brothers, which are here in Attleboro. My great-grandfather, Numa, came from Switzerland around 1901, and he couldn't find a job. This picture includes my great-grandfather, Numa. I can't really see this very well. My grandfather, George, my uncle Roy Guyett, and then two of his uncles. This was taken in their first tool and die shop in around 1904. And it was located on Pleasant Street, just beyond the railroad tracks where the Pleasant Street Bar and Grill is now. There was a little factory in there. That was his first tool and die shop. He couldn't find a job when he came because his craft was being overtaken by photography. He engraved book plates. So that is one of three of our family heirlooms. That is a print of one of his copper etchings, which he did by hand. And I will leave it up here, so if you want to look at it, you are more than welcome to. So he started cutting hubs and dies, and thank you for the representation of hubs and dies on the other table. He started cutting hubs and dies for tool makers and stampings manufacturers. And somebody said to him, "Oh, Numa, you need to be making the parts." So he started making stampings. And in 1926, Guyett Brothers Incorporated and moved and occupied the third floor of 37 Union Street until 1960, when my father and his two brothers, my Uncle Roy and my Uncle Gene, built the building on John William Street, 20 John William Street, which is down near the where the old Army Reserve was. It was next to Levin's, but the Levin's building isn't there anymore. So when we sold our production line in 2018, we were all getting old and tired. We had no interested heirs. Fortunately, we were able to sell our production line to a friendly competitor in Providence, Salvador Tool. The line is still in production. So we were 115 years old when we sold our business. So here are some of the things that we made. We had a production line, an open stock line of about 5,000 items that were just sold into the costume jewelry and related arts trades. So rather than show them to you one at a time, here are just some examples. And so over my 42 years, I have to say it has been a wonderful legacy to be part of producing such things that make the world a prettier place. So, thank you. Stamped in brass, but we also made in sterling on special order. They can be made in gold, but we couldn't get Warren Buffett interested.
I'm Dave Downs, and actually I brought this to donate to the group tonight, and wasn't expecting to show it, and I hadn't looked at it. A friend of mine, Eric Duquette, who teaches at Wamsutta, had this, the Townopoly game of Attleboro. Now, he told me that he'd gotten it from a retired teacher, and and so Rachel discovered it says Fuller on here. So we asked her, oh no, it wasn't, and then she, oh yeah, she remembered it. So I guess it was Betty Fuller's at one time. Now, are these showing up over there? Yeah. So these are local businesses. I hope these are all showing up. And you know, I just looked at it myself when I opened up earlier. So the committee, this was, the Monopoly apparently was the 75th anniversary of the Attleboro becoming a city, I assume. And it was between, let's see, 1914 to 1989. So I assume this was from 89. I'll show it to you in just a minute after I read a few things. The committee was Ellen Parker and Dick Foster and Larry Fitton. I found him to be so much fun. And Paul Smith, Paul Harding, Ted Charon, is that how you pronounce it? And Frank Ferrara. Yeah, this is probably upside down for you, but Eli's is there. The Office Pub Restaurant, the Sun Chronicle, the video place, Eileen's Corset Tree. I remember that place. Yeah, I won't take up too much. I got to mention though, another subject here, Clearflow. I have a friend that worked at Clearflow, and they encased pieces of the moon. Probably a lot of you know that already. And so when you go to these museums and see the moon, like at NASA, they've got them, they're shaped like a pyramid in plastic. It was a Clearflow that encased those in the plastic. Well, my friend worked there. He was a bachelor, and I don't know how old he was, probably late 20s, early 30s by then. And he'd get up late and he'd go to work late. So he'd show up at 10 in the morning or 11 or whatever. And so what they did was after a while, he learned to use all the different machines in the shop. And they'd let him stay late, so he'd get his 8 hours in, and he'd finish up everybody else's work. So he said when they did the moon, they had 2 guards that came in, and they'd watch everything while people were working on the pieces of moon. Well, one night he was here at 8 o'clock, at night, and this is in the summer, so it was hotter than heck there. He had the doors open. He began to, he's working on the moon, and he realized, gee, the guards aren't here. Anybody could come in, and take them or whatever. So what he did that particular night was he hid them in the junk. He knew that nobody would look in the trash pile for them. What do I mean by trash would be the used pieces of plastic and all that they might reuse for something else at one time. But one thing about that is, I guess they did over 200 golf ball size pieces of plastic. They were round with a piece of the moon in there, and they're all numbered. But other than the number, there was no identification. There was a piece of the moon. And they gave them to presidents and kings and queens and politicians here in America. They gave them all out. And apparently right now, more than half of them, no one knows where they are. And apparently they're worth an awful lot of money, the ones that are left. But I just had to tell that story about clear flow.
Well, yes, I will. I bring you a mystery. A mystery. It's been a mystery for me for some time. But a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, that down at Capron Park, by the Spanish-American War Memorial, there was a Gatling gun. A Gatling gun that belongs to Massachusetts, Attleboro, Massachusetts. Now, I've asked around everywhere. I've never gotten a good answer, and I thought maybe one of you might have an answer. I have here a copy of, it was in the Chronicle on August 22nd, 2010. But here is a picture, remember when, and you can just about see it. It's very small. I've asked around every place. I've run out of clues. If anybody knows what has become, it has disappeared.
Now,
Somebody took it.
Brian
It's
and I
gone.
just heard a tale
But
that was restored and fired, but it is also, that person also doesn't know what happened to it. That
No.
they heard that someone made it workable and fired it, took it up by the water tower.
It was up by Ice Hill.
And
They fired.
but it's, again, MIA, he also is like, I don't know where it is.
I know people my age who had brought their children up here in Attleboro, remember taking them to the Gatling gun, and the kids would have a lot of fun, and all that. The last thing I'm gonna leave for you is a postcard of downtown Attleboro, back in the 30s, I guess.
So looking down Park at the Bronson Building, got all those cars down there.
When there was Wednesday night, people would be there on the street shopping, always on Wednesday evenings.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So does anybody recognize that from before tonight? Do you remember seeing it anywhere?
It was on the front of the building, yes.
On the west side?
Stony Street side?
That's what I've been told, and I think I recall it as well. That there was two of those.
Yes.
And, yep, those gates weren't used very often in the later years, as I recall.
Everybody went in the other door.
Yep, but they were there on the gates for a long, long time.
How did you come by it?
That's a secret. A good friend of mine, who unfortunately we recently lost just a few months ago, by the name of Ronald Fontaine, was a tool maker there for many, many decades. And essentially, I understand, was responsible, or partly responsible, for decommissioning the site. So he ended up with a lot of things like that. And his family donated it. So one's in the possession of the Industrial Museum, one with the Preservation Society. Colin thinks we can clean it up a little bit so it'll look pretty spiffy, right?
Yeah, we'll carefully do that.
Yeah. It's bronze. So that's a nice piece of Attleboro history that we just recently came into possession of.
Yeah, basically that was Balfour's logo, I think.
That was on the front door of the building, but on the side door of the building where everybody walked in to work, there was another sign. And that sign said, LG Balfour, where quality walks in on foot every day.
Right, that's nice, Lou.
The Robbins Company, which was located originally in MS Company's building, who now owns the building, but that's where they started. And then they built the building in the 70s over off of O'Neill Boulevard and Maple, right on the corner. So we recently moved them out to South Carolina, and they no longer have a business in Attleboro. So in doing that, they were throwing a lot of stuff away, which is the wrong thing to do in front of me. So I started gathering everything I could that represented the Robbins Company. So they were over 100 years of artisans and engravers, and like we saw with some of the stampings, the engravers started with the hubs and dies engraving. And when you look at these, they are a representation of 100 years of manufacturing. So the auto industry, before Ford put out his Model T, they had REO, and they were doing the dies for REO's insignia on the automobile. And this represents all of the dies over 120 years that they had in their inventory, and by the thousands in the building, they had rows of all these dies, every die in this book, and there's 2 more of them in that room. It was a museum in itself. So these all represent engravers, and the engravers all from Attleboro. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dies from every industry. Here's Ford. And the quality is so incredible. When you hold these things, you realize that somebody worked on this, on a table, at a bench, with these really high-power glasses, so they could literally engrave the fine details of these hubs and dies. And then they made some of the most beautiful things that we came to use across the country, around the world. And they made commemorative coins for the Olympics, all of the Olympics. This is a very modern, acknowledged company for doing insignias. So it didn't stop because they left Attleboro. They just transitioned. They did the entire space program. And I was fortunate enough to get the plates for the space program from the beginning. And they're bronze plates similar to what we saw here. This, similar to this. Not that big, but they're all about 10 by 10. And they use those to model their engraving. Here's an example of, I brought the Mac dog. This plate for him, but there you have all of the Apollo program in these plates, and these are bronze. So I have all these. And they also did a lot of the fraternal orders, the Elks, the Masons, the Knights of Columbus. They made these beautiful, beautiful things that everybody in those organizations honored to wear to represent their position. And they're just, between the engraving, the stamping, the modeling, the painting, I mean, just the process of jewelry making. And as Carlton has exposed here, on so many of these industries, so many people were affected by some of the most beautiful things, you know, that that these artisans from Attleboro did.
I'm gonna banner this one because it's beautiful.
This gentleman right here, he brought us to the world. He put us on the map. It said Attleboro has the finest artisans around. And it just goes on and on and on. And I brought this mostly to just show that all of the officers of the fraternal orders had these huge necklaces of this ornamental insignias. And it was just something that society has held very high regard when you're representing a position, and these things that we created to represent that position has just been, to me, it affected so many people by the artisans that were here to do these jobs, and by hand, by talent. And it just goes on and on and on. I mean, they're just gorgeous pieces of Beauty and the Beast, as a friend of mine in another museum calls it. So I just brought a little bit of everything that I kind of grabbed that was going to be discarded by the dumpsters, and hopefully captured it for our Attleboro history.
And I'm just going to say that once we're in the academy, that is it. Gary could be the speaker. And students, kids could come and learn about this.
This is a huge mystery, but I'm hoping somebody can solve it. Laura Fisk, I don't know if any of you know John Fisk. Anyway, his daughter Laura Fisk has been working with the Attleboro Arts Museum and really wanting to do some research on the women who started that arts museum. And they have history on some of them, but not all of them. So she's digging around, and she found an article that was in the Sun Chronicle from January 30th, 1959. And it talks about Lester Nerney, one of our dear friends, Lester Nerney, who was the president of the Attleboro Museum Incorporated, which I understand is now the Attleboro Arts Museum. I think Brian French or somebody told me that. They were launching a long-range program for the preservation and recording of Attleboro Area history. Beg your pardon. They were going to do tape recordings of different people in Attleboro. And there was a person, I've heard this person's name before, George S. Gibb, who was going to be involved in that. Nobody knows where the tape recordings have gone. So they don't believe they're at the library. The art museum doesn't know of them. I'm glad Carlton's looking into it too. Laura Fisk, I don't know all the details of her background, but she's in television and things like that, and did a lot of digitizing the old Lawrence Welk shows. Because, and I didn't know this, and I wish she was here tonight because she could tell you the details, tape recordings have a shelf life. And this is about 65 years old, and she said even if you find them, they need to be found and digitized before the actual tape just disintegrates on us. So we are in a little bit of a race for time, so if anybody knows anything, and I'm glad Carlton's looking into it, if you have any ideas. Is Lester the one that passed, or was it Nick? Or Lester was the father, wasn't he? Lester was the father, yeah. So. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so yeah, these people are unfortunately not with us anymore. So if you find anything or hear anything, and hopefully we'll have some news for you that they've been found.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. Please come by, take a closer look at some of the items so you can see them up close. And next month's program, October 6th, 19th, is again here. Same time, same place. We'll have Don Doucette talking some more reminiscence about Attleboro. We've put together a big slideshow of historic photos that he can talk about. So thank you for coming.